Now, the G20 summit in Rio has wrapped up with Joe Biden's sudden reversal of US policy in Ukraine, overshadowing the official agenda of fighting poverty and climate change. Brazilian President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva closed out the summit by urging rich nations to bring forward their targets to achieve net zero emissions within 5 to 10 years. And developed nations have historically produced the biggest share of greenhouse gases. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz arrived back in Berlin this morning from the summit. And our chief political editor, Michaela Küfner, who was travelling with Chancellor Scholz, has also just got back to Berlin after a very long flight. So we're very happy to see you here, Michaela. Let's start with what the heads of state and government agreed on in Rio and whether this G20 format is still actually fit for purpose.
Yes, well, what they've agreed on, it's always kind of a policy paper that everybody wants to work towards. It's not legally binding. That's been the criticism from day one of the G20. But after all, this is a very powerful format. 4/5 of the world economy sit around the table in terms of leadership and almost 2/3 of the world population. So if these people agree on something, that's a pretty good starting point. And they want to see a tax for billionaires. They've put down here that trillions of dollars, not billions of dollars, will be needed to help alleviate the effects of climate change and particularly help poorer nations. And this actually has the clear handwriting of Brazil's President Lula da Silva, who's kind of more leftist and who made a deliberate drive here to put those overarching problems that affect particularly poorer nations at the centre. That's hunger, that's climate change, and not the wars in Ukraine and the conflict in the Middle East. So this is an interesting calibration point. And at the same time, it's rather telling who really is driving an agenda and who is having more of an effect on what the world should be talking and acting on. So we heard a clear voice here from the global south. So if anything, just the sideline meetings that are taking place here at this very level are what makes the G20.
And speaking of those sideline meetings, you were travelling with the German Chancellor. He had a meeting with China's President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the summit. Tell us more about what that discussion was about.
I think already the setting there is very telling. The Chinese delegation, they were in a hotel, the only hotel that has its private beach. And it had, in essence, a feeling of Chinese President Xi Jinping holding court. I was there with the Chancellor at that hotel. After him was Emmanuel Macron coming in. And we only know from the Chancellor's side that he went into that meeting wanting to address particularly the war in Ukraine and that these North Korean troops now are suddenly popping up on the Russian side is also something, as he said it, that the whole of Asia should be concerned about. But of course, he wouldn't tell us about what exactly they spoke about.
And let's talk about the role of Western democracies at the G20 and the power balance. I mean, to what extent is the power balance now shifting?
Well, it's clearly shifting towards those upcoming nations, China, of course, but also Brazil, India, the largest democracy in the world. And we're seeing Donald Trump come back into office in the United States. That clearly had a huge effect on how things are debated. It is clear to everybody sitting around the table that everything is conditional to what disruptive policies will be coming out of the White House. At the same time, we are seeing China set up an alternative there. Very open doors in Brazil with Lula da Silva really not seeing eye to eye with Donald Trump at all. They come from very different ends of convictions there. And this is something that is going to be playing out. Will Western democracies be damaged, be limited by a second Trump presidency? And what does that mean for more authoritarian countries, particularly the Chinese model that keeps trying to prove to itself, its own population, but also to the world that it can be more effective in alleviating poverty and potentially also tackling climate change?
All right. We'll have to leave it there. But thank you so much for that. DW's chief political editor, Michaela Küfner, who has just got back from the G20 in Brazil. Michaela, thank you so much.